All right, let me close that so that I can just be here. And then
So it says up here we're on Facebook. Oh, there we are on Facebook.
you see us
Hi.
on Facebook?
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous.
Little delay, but yeah, there we
Yes,
are.
there's definitely a delay. I do not recommend you watching them at the same time. What I do is uh I go to the page
Mm-hmm.
so that I can see people participating and see their comments, but I don't actually watch the video because it's so distracting.
Will I be able to see participants and comments, or will you be the only one doing that?
No, you should be able to see them in, if you're watching the comments section of the live stream, then you should be in good shape. Look at
Oh,
that. We already
look.
have 4 people.
There it
I'm
is.
not sure who they are, but they are there, and I am happy to have you folks.
Melissa's here. Hi, Melissa
They're
Early.
not. Oh, nice. Awesome. I am
I enjoyed your chat the other day, Melissa. That was awesome.
oh. All right, hang on a second. This is what I
La
do. I sit
la.
here and I sing, and everybody just watches me. Hey, Melissa. Everybody just watches me sing. Um, Hi, Maria. Welcome. I do not know you, but I am thrilled to have you here. Um, all right, so okay. Wow, look at this. It's 10 a.m. How exciting!
We're right on
We're
time.
here and we made it.
I was
And
here an hour early, but
you
that's
were, and I find that just charming and adorable. I
yeah.
do. I do. I actually brought like every week I'm gonna get better at this. I brought some notes and some things. Welcome, friends and family, to oh, that's awesome, Melissa, to another in our new weekly Saturday morning conversations on the If You Could See Me Project Facebook page. And beyond, because these end up on our podcast, which you can find everywhere. Uh, all of these conversations include members of our If You Could See Me family. These are participants in the project, past, present, and future. They are professionals in the field of mental health in numerous categories and professional identities. They are peers and they are doers of this work in their own way out in the world. And we are all here committed to changing the conversation around mental health, eliminating stigma, and taking shame off the table. This is my sort of new mantra: take shame off the table. And I want to have these regular conversations because it's really important to me to consider uh, what would happen if shame was no longer an option. If we decided that it wasn't an option for us, that we were going to challenge it within ourselves, and then we were also going to equally challenge it in our communities as a tool that is used for control, as a tool that is used for control in families, in businesses, in schools, in our social circles, in the ways in which we encourage, quote, end quote, encourage, motivate people to do things, because shame doesn't motivate anybody. Shame is a tool for
Mm.
fear. Shame is a tool that engages our own sense of unworthiness.
It's a passive aggressive control technique.
We are taking shame off the table. And so that's what I mean by taking shame off the table in the negotiation of our lives every day, right? We're taking, it's not an option anymore. And so I could not be more thrilled this morning to have my guest Danny Holcomb here as an artist, as a storyteller, as a writer, as a person in recovery, as an emerging peer recovery specialist. As a friend and as a magnificent human that I learn from every time I have a conversation with Danny. You are here to talk about this topic that I love so much: separating the self, the stigma, and the situation. So talk to me a little bit about what that means and why you were called to talk about it here.
First off, thank you. I love you.
I love you too.
I love this process that you've created too, and it has helped me so much into dismantling the shame that I've had for so long, that's come from without and come from within. And that is one reason that this topic speaks to me so much. And, if I can separate myself from the stigma that's imposed on me from the outside world that I internalize and I give back to myself on a regular basis, if I allow that to happen, and the situation, which is my mental health condition, be it substance use disorder, be it bipolar disorder, be it anxiety, whatever. If I can separate those things, then I have a shot at not shaming myself. Then I have a shot at getting past that stigma. And it's like most things that I encounter. It's not a either or, it's a yes and.
Yes.
I have to do all these things, and they're all interrelated and codependent on interconnected. I guess they could be
dependent, right?
Guess they could be codependent on each other. I'll have to look at that. Okay.
Was that a Freudian slip?
Yeah. Yeah, probably.
Maybe not.
That's
okay. Sometimes we do just misspeak.
Sure. And that's another mental health condition that I've had to work through is, codependency through Al-Anon. My dad never drank, my mom never drank, but they were around it growing up, and it's a family disease, and they got it, and they had the characteristics of alcoholics and addicts. So.
Well, when your foundation for your life is, that your safety and happiness is inherently tied to the happiness and mood of whoever your caregivers are, then once you go out into the world, it becomes exceedingly difficult to extricate yourself from that. You then become dependent on other people's happiness to determine whether or not you are okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not aware of that, then it just feels like the water in which you swim. It's when you become aware of it that you can then, take some control over it, right? And decide, oh, well, my happiness, my safety is no longer dependent upon whether or not other people's lives are going the way they're supposed to. That's not my job.
It's not. It is not.
It's such a hard lesson to learn, though, right?
And as you have coined, it's not my job to stay silent for your comfort.
That's right.
You say it more eloquently than I just did, but that's
the concept is what's important. If we can all internalize,
that's the gist.
That's yesterday I was talking to a client and this sort of visual came into my head that I thought, oh, well, this is really, because so many people are dealing with the need to make themselves responsible, or how do I set boundaries without upsetting people? And it's like, whoa.
Right.
You can't sometimes, and that's okay. But there are certain people in our lives it makes it so difficult for us to know when it's okay. And so, the one side of it is like, what's my intention with the boundary, right? Is my intention to hurt you? Because if my intention is to hurt you, then okay, then I have to take the consequences of that, and you're hurt and you're entitled to that, right? If my intention is to cause you pain, okay.
Right.
It's not to hurt you, then it's not. Can you hear me, Danny?
Yeah, you just froze for a second.
Sorry.
But you're back now.
Okay. Then it's not my then I don't necessarily have responsibility over your response to my boundary. But there are people in our lives for whom we make ourselves very responsible for their emotional, well-being, right?
Sure, sure.
Or our spouses or our children.
And
And
as well,
so,
we should be concerned about how we make them feel.
no question. But there's a difference between caring about how someone feels and making yourself the CEO of the emotion department in their bodies and minds, right? And so I have this like visual that anybody who struggles with codependency, and any of these sort of boundary issues, like, before you go to bed at night, set an intention that you're going to dream of yourself in the office building of that individual's emotional insides, and imagine yourself in your coveralls, right, with your little chisel, removing your name from the door of CEO of emotional okayness. Like, this is not my job. And then move on with your life.
Nice.
I just, like, I don't know, maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not, but
And do that 30 days in a row
and see what happens, right?
Yes.
So the idea that, that codependency is so ingrained, it really is the point that, we have been given a job that wasn't ours, and it's impossible for you to think of yourself as an individual, and your own individual happiness, when you feel like it's your job to sacrifice yourself for other people's happiness all the time.
Yeah. One of the best things a therapist ever said to me, and this guy was a piece of work. I think I told you about him last week when we talked, but he said, someone said in group, people are telling me that I'm an asshole lately. And he said, good, that means you're getting healthier.
That's right.
Yeah. When we change the paradigm with the people that are codependent with us, they don't like it.
No, they
don't like it, because it upsets their whole world.
Right. It upsets the homeostasis of
Yes.
the family. That's, like, it may not be a good balance, but it is the balance that everyone recognizes. It is the baseline. And anytime we change our behavior, the people and systems in our orbit get knocked off of their axis. They get knocked off of and then they have, and then change makes people uncomfortable, especially change that they didn't choose.
Right.
So you've taken back your power, and therefore, in their mind, you've taken away some of theirs.
Lord, change I choose makes me uncomfortable. So
right. Well, that's true. That's very true. Very, very true. So so how does this play into the topic of our discussion today?
Well, this plays into part of the situation. What we were just talking about is a situation in our life. This has nothing to do with my true self. I find my true self personally through meditation, through making and creating art. And those are the primary ways for me. Being in nature. Those things help me to find my true self. And that true self has nothing to do with a mental health condition or the stigma that this world would have me believe is true.
Right.
And it's like the Don Miguel Ruiz talks about the dream of the world. If we agree to the dream of the world, that's the world that we create. And the world that has been created for me before I ever came to this earth was that if you've got a mental illness, and I don't like that word, I think that's a non-person centered word. Right. If you have a mental illness, there's something wrong with you. Right. And for centuries, people had mental illnesses and they functioned in society, and people were um, sexual deviants or multi-gendered persons, and they functioned in society. In fact, they thrived in some societies. I mean, um, a, a judge one time when I was had been TDO'd, the one time I got TDO'd, but I've had to talk to judges a few times because anytime you go in the hospital, you get put on a 72-hour hold, right?
Mhm.
And then they have to determine if you're competent to go back out into the world. The one time I got TDO'd, I was talking to the judge. It was just a one-on-one with him. And he asked me, do you have a favorite composer? And I'm like, Handel. And he's like, did you know that Handel wrote the Messiah in 3 days? He locked himself up in a room and wrote that in 3 days. I was like, no, I had no idea. He said, Danny, you have to find a way to make your condition work for you and work within society. And I was like, that was like, wow. I'm like, this guy, okay, this guy's a judge, you know, and I did not expect that from him, that level of insight, that level of compassion
Right.
from him.
Right.
So that was amazing. That was a big thing in my life.
Mm. Wow.
So yeah.
That is just remarkable. If only we could impart that wisdom, you know, in all of the systems in which we have to operate throughout our lives, right? If schools, and they've gotten better, but they're far from good, uh, in just acknowledging and accepting that whatever it is that makes you you can work for you. You can, use this to your benefit rather than it being a detriment. And people don't have to try and change you. You don't have to try and change yourself. And how much different would that, I'm looking at the separating the self, the stigma, and the situation. How much would the stigma, the self-imposed stigma, change if we weren't socialized to believe that having a mental health diagnosis meant that you were broken and somehow needed to be fixed and put into, so that you could fit inside the box, so that you could be another cog in the wheel?
Is that a question? Because I think it is overwhelming how it would change
Right.
that internal
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I
stigma.
think I start as a question and then it becomes a statement and it turns back into a question. And so just respond
But
however you
it
feel
was,
inclined. It's a it's a back and forth.
I like to answer rhetorical questions,
Good.
so
Go
that's
for it.
my thing.
I
Yes.
like to ask them.
I'm
So
I'm kind of a philosopher at heart, so
me too.
I can wax on that for a while.
Me
But
too, which is why I think we get along so well.
yes. Um yeah. I this whole this whole topic, and I stumbled on it. I have to say I stumbled on it on a website called The Mighty, which is a sort of mental health social network where people can make friends and they can post, and then there's articles sometimes. And it was an article by someone, and she talked about this. And I only got to read it once because I thought I sent it to my drive or to myself in an email. And of course I didn't. And now I can't find it anywhere. But that's probably good because I just got to briefly read through it and then use that as a jumping off point. I really identified with this person. She was in her 50s and she had experience with mental illness for 30 years. And that's about, what I've been doing. And by the simple fact that she didn't die and she got to keep trying at this thing, she finally started to make sense of it.
Yep.
And she didn't quit and she didn't die. She didn't quit trying and she didn't die. So I think for me, part of why I want to be why I am a peer recovery specialist is to help clue people in a little earlier. to some of these things, especially self-advocacy. It took me until my 40s to learn self-advocacy. I just kind of went with the flow. I let them drug me. I let them tell me what kind of therapy I was going to do. I let them just do whatever. Cause nothing, cause I didn't know it was best for me. And I was told that, not implicitly or not explicitly, but implicitly. I was told that I don't know what's best for me. So you need to just take these drugs. I don't even remember, like, from my 20s into my early 30s until I discovered making art in my early 30s and 30s. I didn't have a clue, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was doing. And that gave me that stopping drinking and drugging and starting to make art clued me in as to who I was, and I can't be sad about that 10 years or so that is gone. I have very scant memories of it. And it's like, I see young people now in their 20s and 30s, and it's the prime of their life, man, and they are kicking on all cylinders. And sometimes I've been a little jealous, I'm not jealous anymore, but sometimes it made me jealous and resentful. But part of doing this work helps to take care of that resentment. I don't have to be resentful now, because I'm doing something about it. It's an amends. It's an amends to myself. It's an amends to the people who hurt me, and for me hating them and thinking evil thoughts about them, because I'm one of those people that think, some people are like, oh, well, what did you do to somebody? You didn't do anything to them. But I have had enough grounding in metaphysics to know that my thoughts are very powerful, and if I think things about someone, I'm affecting them. I might not see it and they might not know where it's coming from, but it's affecting them. So it's my amends to all those people that I thought evil thoughts about. And it's an amends to myself for allowing myself to let them put me through that.
It's such an incredibly powerful statement, story, to to come to this place and to learn self-advocacy, to learn to have the awareness and the drive and the inner fortitude to say no, to say that doesn't work for me. That's not what I want. That's not what I deserve. How do you help people find that within themselves? What is your process?
Well, first I have to see it in them.
Right.
I have to see it. So I have to, just like I have to strip away my own stigma and situation, I have to strip away their stigma and situation, and I have to see their heart. I'm a member of Unity or Richmond, and one of the core things in Unity philosophy, which is a new thought philosophy, is that I behold the Christ in you. And our version of Christ is different than the mainline one. He's not our savior. He's our way shower, our teacher. Right. And the same Christ energy that was in that man Yeshua that walked around was in the Buddha, was in Gandhi, Martin Luther King, is in the Dalai Lama, is in you and me right now. So first seeing that and then acknowledging that in someone else is important for them to ever be able to see it. If no one ever acknowledged my divinity or my worth, I would never have seen it in myself.
That's right.
you know?
That's right.
So,
And that's why that statement that we hear all the time, no one will love you until you love yourself, is so damaging.
hmm
Because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of hopelessness.
right. Why try? No one loves me.
Right. And how can I see it if I can't, if no one else can see it? And so that, that doesn't mean that we look to other people for our, eternal and total validation. But if you are treated with a lack of respect and a disregard, and then you're blamed for feeling bad about yourself in that process, then it feels like an exercise in futility to even try to do things differently.
Yes.
There is this sort of magical combination of internal and external and, you know, metaphysical, uh, you know, energetic things that sort of have to happen in order to help a person lift themselves up.
Yes. Yes. And I was just sitting here as you were talking, and the back of my mind is flipping through the file cabinet of all those people, the people that did that, and I can sit here and I can, okay, my summer school English teacher,
Mm-hmm.
um, my art teacher in 11th and 12th grade, a nurse in a psych unit, um, you know, people at Unity, people like you, people that have, and it's only grown, it's snowballed. First it was like one or two, and then once I had that epiphany for myself, oh yeah, there's something special about me.
Right.
And I'm special just like everyone else. It's not special in an arrogant way. It's special as in, oh my God, we're all special.
That's right.
So until I had that epiphany, it was only a few here and there. And then it started snowballing. And then it just comes rolling in. As I value myself, others value me. And they see the worth in me as I value myself. Shout out to all the teachers out there. You notice the first two people I mentioned were teachers.
Mm-hmm.
They took the time to see something in me and acknowledge that, so.
It's I mean, there's no question, teachers have such an incredible power to pull things out of children that, they may not ever otherwise know or recognize. I want to go back to what you were saying about, the epiphany and the process, and, and sort of address the spectrum of healing and the non-linear nature of the spectrum of healing. I mean, it's kind of like, it's like one of those sound wave kind of deals, right? And it's constantly moving, and we're constantly sort of bouncing around back and forth. And, you know, it's not as if we go back to the beginning, right? Because there is a certain amount of wisdom and knowledge and self-awareness, insight, whatever you want to call it, that we do learn that you can't unlearn, right? But there is
Mm-hmm.
also a sense that we can forget sometimes some of the things that we've learned. Were you and I talking about this last week? No?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I must have
One of
I
your
was
other awesome
talking to
conversations.
somebody about learning and unlearning, or, constantly, and I don't mean like constantly,
Right.
but like requiring reminders to implement new behaviors. you know, because your foundational behaviors and your foundational thoughts are so ingrained that, you know, that's what this process is. That's what recovery is. That's what, you know, all of it is sort of the perpetual, you know, implementation of the new ideas, the new thoughts, the new behaviors, the support network that reminds me I am not where I was. I do not need to be defined by the version of myself that existed before I got to here. And I just think it's always really important in these conversations to remind the people that are listening that it's not a one and done. No one will ever come on anything that I do and profess to have never had another negative thought in their life and have me not challenge that, right? Like if it doesn't go away. It gets better, but it is a process. And that's why there's value in this. And it is a spectrum. And sometimes we do fall. Whoops. That was my notebook. It just, I just elbowed it and it just fell into the ground, and, you know, and it probably won't get edited out. So there you go, people.
That was unfortunate.
Yeah, whatever. It stopped my pontificating, which is, there's probably benefit. That was the universe saying, Erin, would you just shut up? Which needs to happen occasionally.
Well, what you're talking about is part of the situation, right, that I laid out. Yes, I had an epiphany, but you know, my life didn't magically become better.
Exactly.
You know, I had to work and hold on to that, and I lose it. And it's not a matter of losing it, it's a matter of forgetting.
Right.
For me, it's a matter of forgetting what I've learned, and even sometimes where I came from. Oh, I can get all wrapped up in how great things are today if I'm having a good week or a good day or a good month. I can get real lost in that and start taking credit for it all, you know, and that's when I'm headed for a fall. You know, what's the proverb? Pride goes before a fall, right? It's true. Yep. It's true. It's a cliche because it's true. So that's part of the situation, and part of me helping someone else is to also educate them about their situation. I have to know about what my mental health condition, what my diagnosis is, you know, how it affects my body, because my body affects my brain. You know, I have to know all this stuff in order to tease apart, oh, what's going on? Like I was like, and you know, it doesn't end. A couple of weeks ago, I was driving home from my job at the pharmacy, and waves of sadness just started crashing over me. They weren't connected to anything particular. It just is what was happening. And I had to recognize that as part of my situation. Part of having an affective disorder is not being able to control my moods sometimes. But my moods and emotions, even though I can't control them when they come, I can control what I do with them when they get there. And that's what I have to remember. That's the cognitive behavioral part for me, is to understand, okay, this is my emotion, this is my thinking. How can I use my thinking and my actions to change my emotion right here? You know, and that's what I have to do. I have to, okay, I'm going to go home, make a nice dinner, and then I'm going to go for a walk. And I'm not going to think about these waves of sadness except to feel them. And I'm not going to reject them. I'm not going to resist them. Yes. I'm going to let them come, and I'm going to feel them. And I'm going to ask myself, is this connected to anything? Is it somebody's birthday that I'm remembering that's gone? Is it some? And it wasn't. It was just the way it was that day. So understanding my situation is key, and remembering where I came from. I'm not one of those people that likes to say I'm a drug addict. I'm, you know, I have this, I have a mental illness, because being in recovery is being recovered from that, as Bill Wilson wrote, seemingly hopeless state of mind. I am recovered from the seemingly hopeless state of mind. I can't hear you right now.
You can't? Can you hear me
I
now?
got you now. Yeah.
Okay. I
Um,
was
it,
just sort of talking very quietly. So,
okay. It's being recovered from that seemingly hopeless state of mind. It's not that, I may or may not ever drink or do drugs again, or have a relapse of mental illness, have a relapse of codependency. It's not any of those things because, for me, my story has been relapse is part of the process. And when that happens, I don't lose everything that came before. If I took a drink today, I would not lose all the sobriety I have up till now. So that's why I don't put a lot of stake in continuous sobriety. A lot of people do, and that's great. But it's also a source of pride and can lead to arrogance and to, hurting other people. I've seen it. Somebody will drink or drug or have a relapse, and they're treated as if something's wrong with them and they did something wrong. And hey, you had to come back with your tail tucked between your legs, didn't you? That kind of attitude is damaging.
yes,
And
that's shame.
yeah, I don't like it.
Mm-mm.
So and also, like, some people will say, oh, he died of an overdose, or he overdosed, or he committed suicide. He was having a mental health crisis, or she or they were having a mental health crisis. They didn't commit suicide. They didn't do it to punish you. Maybe it was passive aggressive. I don't know. But those kinds of things are damaging to people.
It's more than, it goes so far beyond the single action. And I think that that's where, the uh the conversation often ends when you say someone committed suicide, or they OD'd, or that really sort of complete language, which uh separates them from their lives, or separates their death from their
Mm-hmm.
lives. It
Mm-hmm.
does not encapsulate their humanity. It
Mm-hmm.
focuses entirely on this deeply stigmatized action that people are uncomfortable with, so they don't want to explore or
Mm-hmm.
try to understand. And so you're absolutely right. It's damaging. And it also creates further stigmatization for other people who are struggling with those same issues. If
Mm-hmm.
I feel like suicidal ideation is akin to a criminal offense, committed suicide, like you committed a
Mm-hmm.
crime,
Mm-hmm.
or overdosing on a substance is akin to, then I'm not going to talk about it. It's going to be more difficult for me to ask for help. That's why conversations around, harm reduction in substance use disorders is so important, because you
Mm-hmm.
recognize that, the substance use is not the sum total of the human.
Right.
And it's important to have those larger societal conversations, because we treat other disorders and diseases and disabilities, and people are able to, and allowed to function in the world. And so what is the harm in considering a different way of looking at it? But first you have to see a person as, with a substance use disorder, as a human being.
Right. Yeah. And it's almost as if a single act, or the inability to have any lasting sobriety or recovery from mental health issues, uh, defines a person.
Right.
It defines their entire life.
Yep.
Well, they're a loser.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
and that's so sad. And that just and it's actually, I believe it's all based in fear.
Yes.
I don't want to look at myself, so I'm going to judge this other person and point my finger at them.
That's right. Well, and what, if you're dealing with, your own mental health uh, challenge, disorder, whatever you want to, call it, or, your own sobriety, what you're doing is you're judging that person because, like you said, you're afraid of the potential of that happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
And the more vilification you can have of that person, the more you put yourself in a position to where, well, that can't happen to me. I've come beyond that. And then, pride, and then falling. It's bad. Don't do it.
And that's a result of internalized stigma. Sorry to interrupt you.
Absolutely. And so we keep coming back to these three ideas. Who am I? What am I internalizing from the world around me? And then how have I internalized that stigma based on the way I think about myself?
Yeah.
And it encapsulates all of it.
All right, we're done. We can go now.
We've solved all the problems. Well, no, but I mean, that's why I think these conversations have value. It's why I focus on stories, because if you sit in a room and you listen to the varied experiences and identities and lives of individuals along the spectrum of mental health experiences, you realize that, Dana over here in the comments just said it can happen to anyone at any time.
Mm-hmm.
If it can happen to me, if it can happen to my loved one, then I am more inclined to have compassion for it. I think there's so much. Okay, so I grew up with a grandfather who had schizophrenia. Okay. Like, from my birth, I learned that you can have a debilitating, disabling mental health disorder that causes you to do all kinds of things that are socially unacceptable and still be worthy of love and respect.
Yes.
Have that part of your identity not be the sum total of your identity. My grandfather did not do that. Okay? He was part of that. But if he had not had the people, primarily, number one, my grandmother, who did not institutionalize him as she was instructed to do by every human in her life when she was 19 years old and newly married to this man who was very quickly diagnosed, he would have had a completely different experience. And I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't exist. So, but it requires us to see the humanity in one another. And I don't know what magical quality my grandmother possessed, but goddamn, I'm glad she had it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It makes me cry. But what happens when you don't have that person in your life? How much pain are people caused because they're the first person in their family to experience this type of disorder, this type of, diagnosis? How much pain is that? And what is our job as humans to one another? So, sorry. I'm emotional.
I like that. It's all good. Yeah, I know I seem to be the first person in my family to have had this, but I've heard stories about my paternal grandmother, who my grandfather had to keep locked up sometimes, So that right there tells me she was having some kind of episodes. Either that or my grandfather was just a really mean person, which by all accounts, he was kind of. He didn't take anything. He was a moonshiner and a subsistence farmer with like 11 kids, so he didn't take any crap, you know. So um just an aside, one of my cousins said they were always afraid to go to his cab. He had this little cinder block house that he lived in by himself after my grandmother had died, and before he married his second wife in his 80s. He would sit there with a gun, and he was known to shoot first and ask questions later when somebody came to his door. You know, people would knock on the door and he'd just be like,
so no wonder people were scared to go there.
right, right. But once Mr. Jeff knew it was you, it was all good. You know, he was sweet as pie.
Right.
So, yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
He might have had some mental health issues.
You know, Danny, I'm glad you said that, because that's what I was thinking is, you know, the feminist in me goes, was grandma having episodes, or
Right.
was she challenging him
Right.
and he didn't like it?
Right.
And, you know.
Well, the other part is I've heard things that, yeah, she was acting bizarre. And
right.
Yeah.
So. Sure. No, I get that. But
right.
I do think that we, you know, many people have those stories in their families.
Mm-hmm.
And in many cases, it is women. This is a whole nother episode, right? This is literally a whole nother episode. In many cases, it is women who were having episodes or being difficult or
right.
acting bizarrely. And
right.
in, you know, so our first thought is she was hysterical. She was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she was just oppressed, and she had 11 children.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have 3 children, and I sometimes question whether or not that was the right decision.
Right, right. You're oppressed by having 3 children.
I worry about them, you know. I mean, it's great, it's fine for, you know, for me, but I'm like, gosh, was this the best decision for them? I don't know. So, you know, I just but that's just another opportunity for us as people to question the stories that we are told. Right. To challenge the narrative that, you know, she's crazy or he's crazy or they're that, or, you know, this is what was going on, and just say, well, but was it though?
Right. Well, there was a huge amount. I mean, this is kind of an aside, but it's kind of still on topic a little bit. There was a huge amount of internal stigma for them, I'm sure. She was full-blooded Native American and he was half Native American. Okay. So, you know, there was a lot going on, and they lived as
other stuff too.
Right. And my grandpa Jeff looked white like me, and so he lived in a white world, but everyone knew what he was and who he was, and I'm sure they were treated accordingly. So
it's so fascinating to me. I don't know why, but, you know, other than that, it must be true that so many of these discussions about mental health and individuals' mental health, you know, experiences always go back to socialization, always go back to some sort of either social oppression or familial oppression, or, you know, it's never about the mental illness. It's always about how polluted is the water you're swimming in. Right? And if your water is polluted, then how are you not going to, you know, come out with whatever adaptive, you know, quality you needed in order to survive in that environment?
Yeah. It's like the only sane solution to an insane world is to be crazy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And yet I don't believe there's enough conversation about how our world affects our mental health. Right? We put it on the person. If you're having a hard time coping, you should see a therapist and get on meds. And it is, I'm sorry, I just got a Facebook message. That's the downside of having Facebook up while I'm doing this, is that sometimes I get messages. And then my screen goes away. It's on you to fix your problem for yourself. And while it is our responsibility to take charge of our own wellness, we also we do ourselves and our world a great disservice by not recognizing in many cases that there are social factors at work always. And
Yes.
if we feel disempowered by the world that we live in, and we don't have people who see the light and the magic and the divinity in us, then it is virtually impossible to be able to see a way through that.
Yeah. Yes. And not to discount or minimize other forms of trauma, but stigma can be seen as a form of oppression, which is trauma. And, I guess the conventional thinking is that my mental illness or mental illnesses in general are triggered by trauma,
Right.
that I can have the same genes as someone else and I end up schizoaffective and they don't, based on the nurture and the environment that we both are raised in.
Right. Exactly. I think we've solved all the problems of the world today.
Now we just have to live it. Yeah. A therapist told me once to stop reading books that I knew it. I needed to just live it. Yeah.
Well, it's true. And it's also terrifying. To put it down and put it into practice. As a singer, and I've said this before, I think, as a singer, the scariest thing for me to do is separate myself from my lyrics.
What do you mean? How so?
Well, like not having my lyrics on stage with me.
Oh, right.
Not having that guide, right? Well, like in a jazz group, everybody's got music. And so I can have them up there. I can have them on the thing, on the music stand. But I don't actually need them. They are a safety net for me. But they also keep me tied to them.
Right.
And so when I have them, I use them. When I don't have them, I realize that I can fly.
Yeah.
Right? I can do it on my own. And if whatever happens, I'll deal with it.
Right.
So there is something to be said for that in like the functions of our life. Like there are those times where you're still playing it safe because it's easier, but it's not helping you to get where you want to go.
Right. Yes.
So you are going to start a new If You Could See Me cohort. You are officially our first If You Could See Me facilitator. That is not me.
I'm so excited about this. And I love performing. I love being in front of people, and I love writing, and I love storytelling. And it's just like all those things together. And I'm so glad you brought it up because I wanted to issue an appeal to any male. It's a men's group. Not crazy about the exclusivity. You can be gender fluid. I'm gender fluid, and I'm in the group. But we want people with male parts essentially to be in this group. And if you're interested, please contact me or Erin and let us know that you're interested. And we'll be starting up in April, and we will meet once a month, and we'll workshop for 2 hours, and then we'll come back next month and workshop for 2 more hours. And then by the end of that, hopefully, and I see this happening, you will have a story that is meaningful to you, that you can stand up and share with other people and inspire yourself and others.
I love it. And I would say male and male identifying.
Yes, male
So I
identifying.
don't necessarily know that you have to have male parts,
Yeah,
but
okay,
if you
good.
are
Thank
if
you.
you are
Because
male or male identifying or gender fluid and you feel more
yes.
comfortable participating in Danny's group than my groups are primarily at this point female and female identifying, um, and or gender fluid preferring to participate with women. We are making a really concerted effort to make this project as inclusive and affirming as it can possibly be. And so I appreciate you, Danny, in joining me on that on that path. Um, I am super excited. Next weekend, I am going to be talking to my monthly co-host, Lucretia Anderson, on the
Who?
on the I, on the podcast. Danny knows her well. I'm sorry, knows them well. And Lucretia and I are going to be talking about getting comfortable apologizing.
Ah,
We're gonna get down and real about, we live in a world that is much broader and more open and more accepting and honoring of diversity and more inclusive and all of those words, and sometimes we mess up. Sometimes we say things that are hurtful unintentionally, I hope. And I certainly never intend to hurt anyone or make them feel excluded, but sometimes that happens. And so Lucretia and I are going to have a conversation next weekend about saying I'm sorry, accepting responsibility for times when we have hurt someone and we didn't mean to. Instead of taking it personally, instead of saying, well, that wasn't what I meant, or you're being too sensitive, just saying, gosh, thank you for pointing that out. Thank you for having that boundary. Thank you for not shaming me in my in calling me into the conversation, but also I want to know. I want to be a person who says, I'm sorry, and I also want to be a person who someone else can say, "Hey, that was gross. Don't say that again."
yeah, right.
Like, ew, that made me, that hurt me. And so, we're going to have that conversation next weekend, which I think
Cool.
is a good extension of, the expansion of the project, the new ways in which we are wanting to honor all stories and create space that is safe and affirming and brave for all stories. So,
Can I start by
yeah.
saying, if I offended anyone by saying male parts in our group? We hadn't really fleshed this out too well,
Right.
but yes, masculine expressing maybe would
Sure.
be a better way to say it. But yes, please, if I offended you, I am so sorry, and that's all I got to say about it. And moving on.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's what we are. We are a group of humble people who, who want to learn and listen and learn from one another. I wrote a piece back in January after our show, uh, because I referred to my audience as ladies and gentlemen.
Oh yes, I read that, and I was so impressed by you doing that.
And because I immediately knew that it was wrong and I didn't like that I did it and I didn't know how to get out of it. And so I wrote that the next day, as an accountability practice for myself and to open up these future conversations and to, to set the baseline that this is a space where we're going to fuck up and it's okay. as long as it's not malicious, and as long as we're willing to accept responsibility for our mistakes and make an effort to do better in the future. When you know better, you do better, right? And so I realized that in that moment in the show that I didn't know how to stop and just take responsibility and then move back into what I was doing. And so that's what I wanted to do. And then the next day I had a conversation with someone else, and we started a discussion about learning to apologize, and then creating space where we have discussions about learning to apologize, learning to, not feel that nasty shame monster creep in and tell us we suck, that then makes us lash out at one another, and instead to just say, I'm sorry, and I'm going to do better, but I'm also going to make this a place where we can openly discuss this, because it's uncomfortable. And if I do nothing else, it's present uncomfortable information to people and encourage them to sit with it, right?
Right.
So is there anything else that you want to share with our audience before we sign off for today?
Restory. If you want to be in a really good group and you want to write and you want to share and you want to be a part of this, maybe without being in the If You Could See Me project and standing in front of a bunch of people, join Erin's Restory group. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. I do it, and I look forward to it, and it helps to encourage me to write on a more regular basis. So.
Well, thank you, Danny. For anybody who doesn't know, I'll use your, I always appreciate it when everybody does that stuff, because I will not do it.
Right.
So I started Restory as an extension of the If You Could See Me project. It's a little bit more intensive. It meets more regularly. There is not a performance aspect to it, but it's more like a maintenance project of, similar concepts of the If You Could See Me project. It's designed and based around writing and telling our personal narrative, in finding stories in our lives and identifying the stories that serve us and the stories that don't serve us. We meet 4 times a month. It's $25 a month, and there are 90-minute meetings via Zoom right now. We'll see what happens when the world opens up. My guess is that it'll probably remain virtual primarily, because we have people participating from other places. But you get weekly emails with writing prompts, opportunities to think and write and consider new ideas, to work and focus on your goals, whatever they may be. And it's very specifically geared toward, helpers and creatives who are recovering from trauma, mental health diagnoses, and, just being sensitive souls. So sometimes you just need the right space.
Just living in this world. I mean, anybody just living in this world.
Yeah. So I would love to have you join me. Please, you can email me at Erin@ifyoucouldseeme.com, or you can go on the If You Could See Me website, ifyoucouldseeme.com, and click on the button that says Hire Erin.
Hire Erin. Yes.
Hire Erin. That's it. So, Danny.
HIRE, not HIGHER.
Yeah, no, that would be super weird. I don't want to elevate myself in that way. But yeah, Danny, thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. And I would, welcome new members to our group. It's growing all the time. And we have lots of different people from lots of different perspectives. And I could not be happier to have you as a member of the Restory community, the If You Could See Me family, and my personal friendship circle.
Yay. Thank you, Erin. Thank you for inviting me and having me. Thank you to everyone who tuned in and who will catch the archived edition. Yeah. Awesome. Life is good, even when it doesn't feel like it.
That's right. Life is good. All right. Bravo. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. And we will see you back here next week, next Saturday, 10 a.m. Me and Lucretia Anderson will be having coffee and talking about apologizing. Wait a minute.